It was supposed to be one of the safest interviews of the season. Holiday lights, a warm studio, a smiling Irish host known for charm, not confrontation, no raised voices, no ambush questions, no drama. But sometimes the most dangerous interviews aren't the loud ones. They're the ones where the host doesn't attack, he simply waits. And when the silence stretches just a second too long, people reveal more than they planned. This wasn't the interview Meghan Markle expected, and by the end of the night, it wouldn't end the way anyone rehearsed. The studio glowed with holiday warmth. A tall Christmas tree stood just behind the desk, dressed in deep reds and golds, its lights reflecting softly off polished wood. Garland wrapped the edge of the host's desk, carefully arranged to feel festive without overwhelming the frame. Snow-like sparkles drifted across the backdrop screen, giving the illusion of a winter evening outside Dublin. Patrick Kielty sat comfortably behind the desk, posture relaxed, one hand resting lightly on a stack of cue cards he barely glanced at anymore. His smile was familiar, practiced, but genuine, the kind of smile that put guests at ease before they even realized it had done so. Across from him, Meghan Markle sat upright in a gray armchair, legs crossed neatly, hands folded with intention rather than comfort. Her expression was composed, alert, not tense, not yet, but aware. She smiled back when Patrick greeted her, though her eyes moved constantly, scanning the room, reading the temperature. "Meghan, welcome back to Ireland," Patrick said warmly. "Or at least, welcome back to Irish television." A polite laugh rippled through the audience. "Thank you," Meghan replied, her voice smooth. "It's lovely to be here." Patrick leaned slightly forward, conversational. "Now, I imagine everyone expects us to dive straight into headlines. But before we do, how are you truly?" It was an unexpected opening, not provocative, not sharp. Meghan paused, just a fraction of a second too long. "I'm good," she said finally. "Busy, grateful, focused on what matters." Patrick nodded as if accepting the answer fully. "That sounds like a full-time job in itself." Another laugh. Meghan smiled wider this time, more confidently. They began gently. Ireland, charity work, projects Meghan was passionate about. Patrick asked questions that allowed her to expand, to frame her narrative comfortably. She spoke about purpose, about choosing peace, about moving forward rather than looking back. As she talked, her shoulders loosened. This was familiar ground. Patrick listened closely, not interrupting, not challenging. He reacted with raised eyebrows at the right moments, soft nods when she spoke about stress and media pressure. To the audience, it looked like empathy. But Patrick wasn't merely listening. He was timing. At one point he glanced briefly at his cue cards, then set them aside. Completely. "Can I ask something slightly off script?" he said lightly. Meghan laughed. "Of course." Patrick tilted his head. "You often talk about reclaiming your story, taking control of the narrative. Do you ever worry that telling it too often gives it more power than it deserves?" The studio quieted just a touch. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't even framed as a challenge. But Meghan's smile shifted, still present but tighter. "I think telling your truth is always powerful," she replied carefully. "Silence has historically benefited the wrong people." Patrick nodded slowly. "Fair point." He didn't push. Instead, he leaned back, hands open. "I suppose Ireland has a complicated relationship with silence. We're very good at it, sometimes too good." The audience laughed again, a familiar Irish self-awareness. Meghan smiled, but her gaze stayed fixed on Patrick now. He continued calmly, conversational. "I lost my father when I was young. People often ask why I don't talk about him more on air." Meghan straightened slightly. "And why don't you?" she asked. Patrick shrugged gentle. "I talk about it when it's useful, not when it's loud." The silence this time lasted longer, not awkward, not hostile, just present. Meghan inhaled before speaking again. "Everyone processes trauma differently." "Absolutely," Patrick agreed instantly. "That's kind of the point, isn't it?" He smiled again, warm, unchanged. But something had shifted. Meghan adjusted her posture, uncrossing and recrossing her legs. Her hands no longer rested together. One thumb pressed against the other repeatedly. Patrick glanced toward the Christmas tree briefly as if resetting the mood. So he said cheerfully, "The holidays, are they quieter these days or just differently noisy?" The audience chuckled. Meghan laughed too, but it came a beat late. "They're intentional," she said. "We protect our space." Patrick raised an eyebrow, playful. "Ah, the most diplomatic word in the English language." More laughter, but Meghan didn't laugh this time. She smiled, controlled, composed, and nodded. Yes, she said, exactly. The cameras cut to a wide shot. Two people smiling across from each other, Christmas lights glowing behind them, everything calm. But beneath the surface, something had begun to hum. Patrick wasn't attacking, Meghan wasn't exploding, yet both could feel it. This wasn't going to stay comfortable, and everyone in the room, audience, crew, even Meghan herself, sensed that the interview had quietly crossed an invisible line, not into conflict but into territory where smiles start to fail. The applause faded and the studio lights adjusted almost imperceptibly. Nothing had changed on set. Not the Christmas tree, not the garlands, not the warm colors washing over the audience, but the energy between the chairs had shifted. It was subtle, like a tightening string. Anyone paying close attention could feel it. Patrick glanced toward the band, exchanged a quick smile, then turned back to Meghan. You've spoken a lot about boundaries, he said calmly. Protecting your space, protecting your family. Meghan nodded immediately. Yes, that's been essential. Patrick folded his hands, his voice still gentle. Do boundaries ever conflict with accountability? The audience murmured softly, not gasps, just awareness. Meghan blinked once. I don't see why they would. Patrick smiled politely. Well, sometimes people feel shut out rather than protected from. It wasn't a statement. It wasn't even framed as his opinion, but it landed. Meghan shifted in her seat, straightening her back. I think that interpretation usually comes from people who benefited from not having boundaries before. A ripple of approval passed through part of the audience. Patrick nodded, acknowledging the response. That's fair, though some might say it depends who gets to decide when the door closes. Meghan's jaw tightened slightly. She answered smoothly, but the warmth had cooled. Anyone has the right to decide who has access to their life? Patrick leaned back, eyes thoughtful. Even public figures. Yes, Meghan replied quickly. Especially public figures. Patrick raised a finger, not interrupting, clarifying. I ask because your story has been told in many ways. Books, interviews, documentaries. Some viewers feel they know everything yet are told they're not allowed to question it. Meghan's smile returned, sharp, polished. People feel entitled to women's stories, she said. That's not new. The room reacted. A few claps, a few nods. Patrick didn't challenge the point. Instead, he let it breathe. True, he said softly. Though I wonder if entitlement feels different when the audience paid to listen. That landed harder. Meghan paused longer this time. You're framing this as if speaking is a transaction, she said carefully. It's not, Patrick inclined his head. I'm framing it as a relationship, and relationships go both ways. The silence stretched. Meghan's hands clasped again, but this time tightly. I've never forced anyone to listen, she said. People choose to. Patrick smiled gently. They do, and sometimes they choose to ask follow-up questions. Meghan exhaled through her nose, controlled but audible. Patrick glanced briefly toward the audience. You see, in Ireland, when someone tells a story again and again, we eventually ask why it still needs telling. A nervous laugh rippled across the room. Meghan's eyes stayed locked on him. Because the truth doesn't expire, she replied. Patrick nodded. No, but narratives can. The word hung in the air. Meghan leaned forward slightly now, abandoning the relaxed posture she'd held earlier. I think what you're suggesting is unfair, she said, and frankly reductive. Patrick raised his hands, palms open. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking how it feels to live inside a story that no longer belongs solely to you. That was the moment Meghan's expression shifted. Not anger, but irritation breaking through control. It belongs to me, she said firmly, because it happened to me. Trick didn't blink. And yet, it shapes institutions, families, public opinion. Meghan's voice sharpened. Are you implying I'm responsible for other people's reactions? Patrick paused, choosing his words with care. I'm asking if you ever feel the weight of them. The audience went quiet. Meghan leaned back, crossing her arms for the first time. I refuse to carry blame for truths others find inconvenient, she said. Patrick nodded slowly. Understood. He let the silence sit longer than before, then casually. Do you ever miss the simplicity of before? Meghan frowned. Before what? Before everything became an argument. Meghan laughed, but it wasn't warm. That was never real. Patrick's smile faded just a touch. I see, he said. He glanced down at his cards for the first time in several minutes, then back up. Let's talk about choice, he said calmly. Leaving, staying, speaking, not speaking. Meghan's eyes narrowed. I don't like where this is going, she said bluntly. Patrick smiled again. That same soft Irish calm. That's usually when conversations get interesting, the audience murmured. Meghan didn't smile back. For the first time since she'd walked on stage, she looked less like a guest and more like someone preparing for a fight. And Patrick knew it. He wasn't pushing, he was simply not stepping aside. The air in the studio felt heavier now, not louder, not chaotic, just dense, as if every word had to push its way forward. Patrick didn't rush. He never did. He adjusted the card in his ND, glanced at it briefly, then placed it back on the desk without reading. I want to be very clear, he said, tone measured. I'm not here to corner you. Meghan gave a short, humorless smile. It feels a bit like that. Patrick nodded once. That tells me we're close to something honest. A murmur rippled through the audience. Meghan straightened, crossing one leg over the other, reclaiming posture. Honesty doesn't require interrogation, she said. Patrick leaned forward slightly, not aggressive, just engaged. Sometimes it does when honesty has been rehearsed. That did it. Meghan's eyebrows lifted sharply. Are you suggesting my experiences are scripted? Patrick didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked, are they ever simplified? The silence stretched long enough to be uncomfortable. Meghan's voice dropped. My life isn't a narrative device. Patrick nodded. No, but it has become one. Meghan's jaw tightened. You keep saying become, she said, as if I chose this. Patrick met her gaze. You chose to speak. Her eyes flashed. I chose to survive. The audience reacted audibly now, a mix of applause and uneasy shifting. Patrick raised a hand gently. And I respect that, truly. But survival stories don't usually come with production deals. That line landed like a dropped glass. Meghan inhaled sharply. That's incredibly dismissive, she said, her voice no longer smooth. You're minimizing real trauma. Patrick didn't raise his voice. I'm questioning packaging. Meghan leaned forward now, palms on her knees. You don't get to decide how someone heals. Patrick responded immediately. And you don't get to dictate how people respond. The temperature spiked. Meghan shook her head. This is exactly what I mean. A woman speaks and suddenly she's controlling the narrative. Patrick's tone hardened just slightly. A public figure repeats a story and suddenly criticism becomes cruelty. Meghan laughed, sharp, brittle. Criticism from whom? Tabloids? Commentators? People who profit from tearing women apart? Patrick didn't flinch. From audiences who feel spoken at, not spoken with? That struck something. Meghan's voice rose a notch. I don't owe anyone access, Patrick replied, calm but firm. No, but access is what built the platform you're standing on. The room went still. Meghan stared at him incredulous. So now I should be grateful. Patrick shook his head. No, but aware. Meghan's smile vanished completely. You're framing this as hypocrisy, she said, and I won't accept that. Patrick leaned back, finally breaking eye contact, but only for a second. Then help me understand, he said. What's the end point? Meghan frowned. End? Yes, Patrick continued. When does the conversation stop? When does the story get to rest? Meghan's answer came fast. Too fast. When people stop distorting it, Patrick sighed softly. And if they never do, Meghan's hands clenched. Then that's on them. Patrick's expression changed. Not angry, not mocking, disappointed. That's where we differ, he said quietly. I think when you speak to millions, some responsibility sticks. Meghan's voice sharpened again. So I should stay silent. Patrick shook his head. No, but maybe listen. A few gasps, some applause. Meghan sat back, crossing her arms again, fully defensive now. You invited me here, she said, and now you're lecturing me. Patrick met her eyes. I invited you for a conversation. Conversations push back, she scoffed. This feels like judgment. Patrick responded without hesitation. It feels like consequence. The word hung between them. Meghan stood still, motionless, then laughed softly, shaking her head. Wow, she said. This is not what I agreed to. Patrick remained seated. I never promised comfort, he said gently. Only honesty. Meghan looked toward the audience, then back at him. I think you're enjoying this, she said. Patrick's reply was immediate and calm. I think you're not. The tension was now undeniable. Meghan uncrossed her arms, leaned forward, voice low and firm. You're crossing a line. Patrick looked at her steadily. Which one? She stood halfway from her chair, then stopped. The audience held its breath. Meghan sat back down, but the damage was done. The conversation hadn't exploded yet, but the fuse was burning fast, and everyone in the room knew. If this continued, someone was going to walk away. The silence after Patrick's last sentence was louder than any argument before it. Meghan didn't speak at first. She stared at the desk, then at the audience, then back at Patrick, as if weighing whether the moment deserved words at all. Finally, she stood. The movement alone sent a ripple through the studio. Chairs shifted. Someone in the front row whispered, "Oh." Patrick looked up at her, surprised but not alarmed. "Are you leaving?" he asked calmly. Meghan let out a slow breath through her nose. "I think I've been very clear," she said. "This conversation has crossed into hostility." Patrick remained seated, hands folded. "It crossed into disagreement," he replied. "Those aren't the same." Meghan shook her head, lips pressed tight. "You frame me as manipulative, performative, and ungrateful. That's not disagreement. That's character judgment." Patrick's voice stayed level. "I question choices, not character." Meghan laughed, this time without humor, without restraint. "That's convenient," she said. "You get to provoke and then hide behind questions." Patrick stood now slowly, matching her height but not her energy. "I didn't provoke," he said. "I refuse to applaud." The audience reacted instantly. Scattered applause mixed with sharp gasps. Meghan turned toward them, eyes blazing. "You see," she said, "this is the culture. A woman speaks about pain, and the moment she doesn't soften it for comfort, she's punished." Patrick answered before the applause could grow. "No, she's challenged." Meghan's voice cracked just slightly, but she pushed through it. "I didn't come here to be dissected." Patrick nodded. "And I didn't invite you to be canonized. That was the Bria King point." Meghan stepped back from the chair entirely, grabbing the edge of the small table beside her as if grounding herself. "You know what?" she said louder now. "I'm done explaining myself to people who've already decided who I am." Patrick looked at her. Not triumphantly, not smugly, just steady. "I don't think I have," he said, "but I do think you're done listening." That landed harder than anything else. Meghan picked up her coat from the chair. The audience was dead silent now. "This interview," she said, turning back to him one last time, "says more about you than it does about me." Patrick didn't interrupt. He waited, then replied softly, "And how you leave it will say more than anything you said." Meghan froze for half a second, then she straightened her shoulders. "I don't owe anyone closure," she said. Patrick inclined his head. "No," he agreed, "but audiences remember exits." She looked at him. Truly looked as if realizing there would be no final victory here. Only footage, only headlines, only replay. Without another word, Meghan walked off stage. Not rushed, not dramatic, but unmistakably final. The studio lights dimmed slightly as producers scrambled behind the scenes. The camera stayed on Patrick, standing alone for a beat too long. He exhaled slowly, then turned toward the audience. "Well," he said quietly, adjusting his jacket, "that wasn't planned." A few nervous laughs broke the tension. Patrick looked directly into the main camera now. This was meant to be a conversati. "On," he said. "And conversations require two people willing to stay." He paused. "Thank you for watching." The music cue came late. The screen faded to black. Within minutes, clips flooded social media. Meghan Markle walks out of late show interview. Patrick Kielty refuses to back down. Uncomfortable TV or necessary confrontation. Comment sections split clean down the middle. Some called it cruel, others called it overdue. But everyone agreed on one thing: no one forgot it. And that more than applause or outrage was the moment's true legacy. If this moment made you uncomfortable, that's exactly why it mattered. For more real stories, tense interviews, and moments they wish had stayed off camera,